Hello there. Welcome into a Friday edition of the show. Boy, am I glad to have you, whether you're listening on air, whether you're listening on the Extra Sports 1300 app, or whether you're watching this show on our social media platforms at Extra Sports 1300 on Facebook, Instagram, and X. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way over the course of the next 3 hours. Love to get your take on any and all of them at 719-247-1313. You can call or text that number. It is a Friday, and I want to send you into the weekend a winner. So I have Switchbacks tickets to give away. I have Pikes Peak or Bus Rodeo tickets to give away. So stay tuned for that. I'm not above bribing you to listen to this show. That's the moral of the story. So let's get started, shall we? With a little hockey. Nathan MacKinnon, as you have probably seen and heard by now, won the NHL's MVP, commemorated with something called the Hart Trophy. And you could make an argument for Nathan MacKinnon on a number of different fronts. Statistically, only player in the NHL that was in the top 4 in goals, assists, and total points. Lost out on the Art Ross as the league's leading scorer by a measly 4 points. Analytically, he was the best 5-on-5 player in the league. When you need your players to be at their absolute best, Nathan MacKinnon was better than everyone, including Nikita Kucherov and Connor McDavid. And if you want team success with your MVPs, the Avalanche had a more successful regular season than Edmonton and Tampa did. But I thought there was an argument. I really did. And you look at Nikita Kucherov winning the Art Ross Trophy. The last 5 MVPs have either led the league in points or goals. While Tampa was not an elite team this year, they would be, picking very early on in tonight's NHL draft without him. And then Connor McDavid is Connor McDavid. He had another brilliant season, looked at times disinterested when it comes to scoring goals. Took much more pride in giving Zach Hyman a chance to win the Rocket Richard Trophy than getting his own goals. You watch him and he just seems to toy with teams at times. I thought all 3 MVP candidates, well, I do think that it really came down to Kucherov and Nathan MacKinnon. I thought all 3 had arguments. I just thought the strongest was that of Nathan MacKinnon. And you know who agreed with me, not on the Nathan MacKinnon had the strongest argument part, but the fact that it was so even between the 3. Nathan MacKinnon agreed with me.
Remember to congratulate the other guys this time. Congrats to Cooch and Connor. Could easily be any of you guys. I think everyone knows it was such a toss-up this year.
I thought it was. And then the voting came out. The surprising thing is not that Nathan MacKinnon won the MVP. I thought he would. I thought he should. The surprising thing is that he won this thing in a laugher. 137 first-place votes. Not a Connor McDavid type margin, but a larger margin of victory than Austin Matthews had a couple of years ago. And the feeling around Austin Matthews was, well, he scored 60 goals. You got to give it to him. I remember distinctly a couple of years ago the conversation as Austin Matthews was approaching that, to that point, a ridiculous number And then Connor McDavid the very next year had even more goals than that. But the talk for the last month of the season was if Matthews gets 60, it's a wrap. And yet he didn't win the MVP by as wide of a margin as Nathan MacKinnon won. That was the shocking thing about last night. I thought it was much closer between he and Nikita Kucherov than that. It wasn't particularly close. Here's Nathan MacKinnon after the NHL awards banquet / show, being the humble guy that he is.
I honestly never thought I'd win these, so very special. Like I said in my speech, like just every player I grew up idolizing has their name on these things. So to be a part of that company is surreal. It hasn't really sunk in, and it's definitely a special thing.
You think back, it wasn't that long ago that Nathan MacKinnon said, I'm heading into my 9th year and I haven't won bleep. Wasn't that long ago. And now he has a Stanley Cup and he has an MVP. And you throw that in the mix with his Calder Trophy that he won as the league's Rookie of the Year. He now occupies a list that includes names like Ovechkin, Malkin, Kane, Forsberg, Peter, not Philippe, just in case there's some confusion, and Mario Lemieux as players who have won a Calder Trophy, a Hart Trophy, and a Stanley Cup. And of course, you know that there is another player on this Avs team that I don't put it past him to join this list at some point, that being Cale Makar. Now, you could argue that Nathan MacKinnon probably should have won in that 17-18 season. That was one of the weirdest years I can remember. Blake Wheeler got a first-place vote that year. It was bizarre. Taylor Hall barely won it over Nathan MacKinnon. I think it was 12 votes, 12 first-place votes. I go by first-place votes. I know it's ranked choice and you get a point total. I don't care. First-place votes is what matters to me. And that's the same reason why I'm not going to start a manhunt for the guy who voted Nathan MacKinnon 5th. That's ridiculous and idiotic. But ultimately, it's the first place votes that really matter. That year, Taylor Hall won it by 12 votes. It was the weirdest and probably worst MVP vote ever. So you could argue Nathan MacKinnon should have 2. The margin in which Leon Draisaitl won his MVP over Nathan MacKinnon makes it kind of hard to say he should have 3. It was a pretty resounding victory. But he's got this. He's got his MVP. He's got a Stanley Cup. And as decorated as Connor McDavid is in terms of individual accolades, doesn't have that cup. Now, I was trying to think about a comparison, and there's really not, because right now the best player in the NHL has won nothing. No championships. So it's not really a Gretzky-Lemieux thing. But there's a little bit of a universal belief that Connor McDavid's the best player in the world. And I'm with that. So I remember it like it was Gretzky, and then Mario Lemieux was fantastic, but never seemed to get as much appreciation as you felt he deserved. And it was just because there was this not only generational, but all-time great that was there in the league. And Mario Lemieux got MVPs, he got Stanley Cups, but Gretzky won so much until he went to LA, of course. I just don't know what the historical comparison would be, but it's just Nathan MacKinnon needed this to kind of try and cement his place as the best player not named Connor McDavid. Because we all agree on Connor McDavid. I think, anyway. There's always dissenting opinions. And I've thought Nathan MacKinnon is the best player not named Connor McDavid in the league. But again, if this is kind of a rolling total and you take a few years into it, Nikita Kucherov has won another MVP in recent times. He's won multiple Stanley Cups. But I think it's important for Nathan MacKinnon's legacy that he finally gets this. And the other side of this conversation, or the bigger picture, is that for the first time since 1989, and the only other time since 1989, one city is home to two MVPs in the same year. Wayne Gretzky and Magic Johnson in 1989. And there are some similarities between this year and that. That year, neither the Lakers nor the Kings won their respective leagues championships. Magic Johnson's Lakers broke down a bit physically and ended up losing in the finals. Nuggets, you could say, this year broke down a bit physically, but not with injuries. And then the NHL was very different, but essentially Wayne Gretzky bowed out in his second playoff series, just like Nathan MacKinnon did. So I just bring that up because it's interesting to see the similarities between LA in 1989 and Denver in 2024. And then you look at the bigger picture locally. We've had this conversation before, but now you have Jokic in the last 4 years. You have 3 Jokic MVPs, 1 Nathan MacKinnon MVP. You have the Avs and the Nuggets, both as champions. I think we are living in a golden age of sports in terms of the level of talent, because let's not forget too what Jamal Murray was a couple of years ago, what Cale Makar is. So from a talent perspective, success, individual accolades, it is a golden age. But I don't know what has to happen. Maybe the Nuggets need to turn into a dynasty and the Avs go back and win another Stanley Cup. Maybe Cale Makar needs to win the MVP next year. I don't know what it is that could happen. Bo Nix leading the Broncos to a Super Bowl, that might be it. I don't know that anything will ever compare to the Colorado sports scene in the late 90s. Late 90s, early 2000s. Because you had Sakic and Forsberg leading the Avalanche. In 2001, they end up winning a cup. Broncos go back-to-back. But the Avs were still young, right? It wasn't their first championship, but they were still young enough that the excitement around this team was at a fever pitch. And we know where the Broncos lie. Anytime the Broncos have success, that kind of elevates everything because they're the most popular team in the state. but it felt different. And maybe it's age. During that time, I'm entering high school. And of course, I didn't grow up a Broncos fan. But I still say, because I grew up amongst Broncos fans, I still understood the excitement that they had when the Broncos were going back to back. Maybe it's my age then as compared to now, but it just feels different. The late 90s just felt different. But in terms of accomplishment, it's comparable. Really is. Sakic won an MVP. Elway didn't win MVPs, but you have 3 championships as opposed to the 2, 4 MVPs instead of the 1. At least it's similar, right? At least it's similar right now as to what it was in the 90s. And that's saying something, because late 90s in Colorado sports, it didn't get, the Rockies didn't really beat us to a pulp yet in terms of just being awful. I mean, don't get me wrong. There were some bad seasons for the Rockies around that time, but we were less than a decade into their existence. It was still new. It was still exciting. I think that added to it as well. Nuggets were garbage, so nothing to say about them during that time, but I don't know. It feels like right now the last 4 years have been some of the best that we've ever seen in Colorado sports. Take your thoughts on that. 719-247-1313. Can you have more than one golden age? That's what I'm saying. There's multiple golden ages, but the standard is the late 90s. Nathan MacKinnon wins his first MVP. And Denver's not title town, but it's MVP town. Just getting going on a Friday edition of the show. Nuggets are making some headlines with some of the things they have tried and may be trying to do as we get ready for NBA free agency. Get into that. A little soccer. Definitely not the debate. No debate. Although I'll make one reference in setting up the next topic. I'm not talking about that disaster in Atlanta. I'm going to talk about the other disaster for America that was in Atlanta. That's the only reference I'm going to make. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Speaking of which, if you would rather be at the match tomorrow night between the Switchbacks and Monterey Bay, I won't be offended at all. It's a great time anytime we're out at Widener Field. And so definitely get your tickets, switchbacksfc.com. And don't forget, coming up in less than a week's time, it will be the 4th of July match, and it is set to be a spectacular at Widener Field. So just as you're getting tickets for tomorrow night's match, and there aren't many left, go ahead and get your tickets for the 4th of July because there aren't many tickets left there. If only you had some connections, perhaps for a ticket giveaway to July 4th. Maybe. Stay tuned. First text out of the gate today from Steve G. As your psychiatrist, I didn't realize everybody's been telling me I need to go see a psychiatrist, and I had been talking to one all along. Thanks, Steve. I feel you're suffering from nostalgia. Wantis. Nostalgia wantis? Now I have to question I would like to see your diploma. Make sure that you are a psychiatrist as you claim you are. Let me try to read that again. As your psychiatrist, I feel you're suffering from nostalgia wantis. It happens a lot for males at your age. P.S. I'll send you my bill. Feel free. I mean, isn't it? Doesn't it feel similar? Not better, but just similar. The stakes around the teams right now in the state, the interest level, the excitement level, the accolades, it feels similar. Doesn't quite feel like the late 90s, but I blame Elway for that. Anything with Elway automatically trumps everything else. But that's what you sign up for when you live here in Colorado, that anything John Elway does is automatically more important than what any other athlete does. And I'm fine with that. I really am. So it was a little bit of a rough one for America last night, wouldn't you say? And the epicenter of that was Atlanta. Now, on the sports side of it, although there was an unexpected bit of sports banter between our last two presidents, but I want to talk about the actual sporting event that took place last night as the U.S. men's national team somehow, some way, lost to Panama 2-1. Not a match they were expected to lose. Now, there is plenty of blame to go around. Plenty of it. So it's not all on one person, but you must start with Tim Weah. You have to. The lion's share of the blame falls to him. He lost his freaking mind in picking up that red card. There was no excuse for it. There's no reason for it. And it was extremely detrimental to the United States to go down a man that early in the match. It starts with Tim Weah, but it doesn't solely lie on the shoulders of Tim Weah. It doesn't. Again, plenty of blame to go around. And to Tim Weah's credit, it's probably little consolation. Would have been received a little bit better had the United States actually pulled out a result last night. But to his credit, he did give a lengthy apology on social media last night, owning up to what he did and his part in that abysmal performance by the United States. But Greg Berhalter has a part in this too. No bones about it. Okay? Despite being down a man, the United States still takes the lead. From there, even down a man against Panama. Again, I cannot stress this enough. They were playing Panama, not Brazil, not Germany, not France. They're not even playing in the Euros. They're playing Panama. Lionel Messi doesn't play for Panama. You can find a way. You can scheme up, concoct a way to protect a 1-goal lead, even if you got out of there with a point. It's okay. A point. Just don't lose. And you have a 1-0 lead, yes, down a man, but can't you figure out a way, Greg Berhalter, to help your team schematically stave off a Panamanian comeback? And the answer is yes. The answer is absolutely yes. Here's Greg Berhalter taking ownership of his part of last night's loss.
You know, we talked beforehand about the tendencies of this referee. We knew what he's capable of. And, you know, to be honest, I think we played right into his hands. And we made it, you know, that decision, I think, pretty easy. You know, Tim got bumped, he got checked, and he reacted. And, you know, he apologized to the group. And, you know, I think he understands what a difficult position he put the group in. Nonetheless, it happened. And, you know, as a result, you know, we lost this game. And, you know, we're going to have to move on and figure out how to win next game.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was fully expecting Greg Berhalter to do what so many coaches do, even if they don't mean it. Raise your hand and take responsibility, because you know how detrimental that loss is. And you know the reaction to that loss, what it's going to be. You don't have to get on social media to understand what people are probably saying. I did not catch one instance last night where Greg Berhalter owned up to any part of that last night. And two things from that particular clip that are especially troubling. Let's start with the last part that Greg Berhalter threw it in. Let's hear it one more time.
You know, we talked beforehand about the tendencies of this referee. We knew what he's capable of. And, you know, to be honest, I think we played right into his hands. And we made it, you know, that decision, I think, pretty easy. You know, Tim got bumped, he got checked, and he reacted. And, you know, he apologized to the group. And, you know, I think he understands what a difficult position he put the group in. Nonetheless, it happened. And, you know, as a result, you know, we lost this game.
No. That is not true. He has his cause and effect wrong here. Many other things happened between the time Tim Weah got ejected and the United States losing. There were other things that happened, including the United States taking the lead. So, no, it wasn't a Tim Weah red card in the 88th minute that immediately led to the match-winning goal. It was back in the 16th minute. There is not a direct line between the red card and the United States losing. Other things happened, other things that you're responsible for. And then the first part, I know that officials are discussed by teams, but it is it's not we talked. It's like, it's not even something that you say. Like maybe behind the scenes, you say something like, hey, this guy's a little happy with the cards. But by framing it in that way, it sounds like Greg Berhalter had the United States worrying about two opponents last night. Panama and the official, who, by the way, was absolutely awful. Okay, so I'm not saying that that referee doesn't have a reputation. He absolutely does. And I'm not saying he was good last night. He was quite poor. But here's another one of those things that they teach you at, high-level coaching 101. Don't blame the officials. You look like a loser. And certainly don't say that it's part of your game plan, essentially, that know that the referee, he's going to be quick to pull out cards on you tonight. One opponent is difficult enough. And he's bringing a second one into it. So in that 30-second clip of his synopsis of the match, he blames the official and he blames Tim Weah. Takes zero ownership for his part in it. Okay, again, plenty of blame to go around. It must start with Tim Weah. But this isn't new. And also to the Tim Weah thing. Okay, grown man, it's on him, right? But this isn't the first time that a member of the U.S. men's national team has gotten a red card for essentially losing his mind. Sergino Dest, about a year ago, remember? So that's two in a relatively short amount of time, two high-profile red cards earned by guys that are seemingly losing their mind and not reacting to something in a productive way. Doesn't some of that have to be on the head coach? I look at this team and they feel a little entitled, is how I would put it. Right? They've received so much hype, so much praise. They're getting big money contracts in Europe. It just feels like, hey, we've arrived and we are entitled to things. And then when something doesn't go their way, they kind of collapse. Isn't that part of the responsibilities of the head coach to maybe get that kind of entitlement mentality out of them? So I'm not even entirely sure that the red card last night does not reflect somewhat poorly on Greg Berhalter. But this is actually perfect. It really is. And I'll tell you why. Because now they must beat Uruguay. They have to. Their backs are against the wall here. And they are facing the realistic possibility that they bow out in the group stage of a tournament, that would be the absolute worst case scenario. It was a foregone conclusion that they get out of the group. It was just a matter of how far past that could they get. It would be an abject failure and disaster if the United States on their home turf got bounced in the group stage. So this is why it actually creates a perfect scenario. Because if they win, if they pull out a tremendous result, then it's like, okay. Not only are they through to the group stage, which is a good thing, but you're like, all right, this team has the ability to bounce back. They have some resiliency. Maybe Greg Berhalter, there's something there with him. Maybe. I don't want to get too carried away. But it would be a character-building win. It would be a gutsy win. It would be a great win with their backs against the wall. Or they lose, or they don't get the result that they need, because let's not forget, in the first game of the group stage, they only scored 2 goals when they could have easily had 5, and goal differential is a thing when you are trying to get out of the group stage. But let's say they don't get the result they need. Greg Berhalter is going to be fired, which would prove my feelings for a long time that he shouldn't have been brought back in the first place. So it really is, it's almost like when your team is not that good and you're going up against, a rival team, it doesn't even have to be that. It's just your general position is, I want my team to win, right? I root for my team to win. I don't root for my team to lose. But Victor Wembanyama is sitting there in the draft, and you need to lose this game in order to get Wemby. So you start to weigh it, and you go, well, I always want my team to win, but Wemby. So you want the United States to get out of the group stage, but if they don't, they would almost assuredly get rid of Greg Berhalter. It's a tough spot you've been put into if you're a United States soccer fan. You can do it anonymously. I will protect your identity. Do you want the United States to make it out of the group with everything you've seen? Do you really and truly? Because if they do, I don't think that no matter what happens the rest of the way in Copa America, that Berhalter's getting let go. It's only if they get bounced in the group stage. I'm not going to put you on the spot like that. But you know that it's tough. You're in a tough spot. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, the results of our final quarterfinal matchup. Our semis are set in our Goat of Goats tournament. I'll let you know who is moving on, Tiger or Brady. The best pro rodeo cowboys and cowgirls from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico are coming to Colorado Springs July 9th through the 13th for the NFR Open at the Pikes Peak or Bust Rodeo with over $1 million in payouts. They'll be riding to win. This is where champions and careers are made. Get your tickets now at pikespeakorbust.org. Our final quarterfinal matchup in the Goat of Goats tournament is set, and it was our closest vote of them all. But with 60% of the vote, Tiger Woods has defeated Tom Brady and will be moving on to face Michael Jordan. Our semifinals, which will begin on Monday, Jordan versus Woods, Ali versus Gretzky. And then the winner of those two will go against each other. I would say at this point, pretty chalky. Pretty chalky. Woods Brady was interesting. But depending on how many international votes came in or outside of North America came in, maybe Messi could have upended Wayne Gretzky, but yeah, if you told me at the beginning of this that we would have Jordan, Woods, Ali, and Gretzky, I'd be like, yeah, that's probably how I would have voted. So we'll see now. My prediction, and I suppose you could make me wrong by voting, and I welcome you to do so. I think we're going to get Ali versus Jordan. And then we'll go from there. So looking forward to that next week. Can I just say something? I know that I'm feeding the beast. I know I am, but sometimes I just can't help it. Okay. This conversation that has come out of the Lakers drafting Bronny, just gotta say one thing. Okay. I appreciate what Woj and Stephen A. Smith have both said on the subject of nepotism. And they are correct. That nepotism has long existed in every industry and it has long existed in the National Basketball Association. Okay? LeBron James didn't invent nepotism. Because also, let's not forget that J.J. Redick being hired is a form of nepotism. It's not just being related to somebody. It is also your personal connections to that person that get you ahead in your career. Or you are being chosen because of that close relationship. Okay? LeBron James didn't invent this. Okay? I'm not giving him that level of credit. He didn't invent nepotism as an idea, and he didn't bring nepotism into the NBA. I don't think that's what people are claiming. Nepotism in every walk of life and every industry is wrong. It's not a good thing. I know it exists. I understand that. To me, it's like this whataboutism. Like, well, what about the fact that, coaches get onto the staffs because of the relationship? Yeah, I know that. And I don't think that's great either. Here's the difference. Okay? This is the most public-facing example of nepotism that we have seen in the NBA. Right? Just the most obvious, blatant, right in front of your face with the most important part of any organization. Right? Your public-facing part of your organization, for the most part, are your players. That is why this is being discussed. I know LeBron didn't invent nepotism. I also don't think that because a certain group of people have been able to exploit nepotism for their gain, that we should say, well, it's okay if this group does it. No, we don't like it over here. We don't want them to start it over here or do this. I just think they're missing the point. Nobody is saying that LeBron James invented nepotism. Although, if any network were to credit LeBron with such a significant invention, it would be ESPN. The point is, we all see it. And we can point it out. Yeah, I don't know who the assistant GM is of a lot of NBA teams, and maybe it's the son of the owner. But as far as I can remember, there was a lot of talk about nepotism when it came to the Cronkies. There were a lot of discussions about nepotism when it came to the Cronkies. Now, and maybe this is argument for Bronny James, but Josh Kroenke turned out to be a pretty good governor and steward of these organizations. And maybe Bronny shows that he is a legit NBA player and can have an impact. But we talked about it with the Cronkies. It's been talked about with the Lakers before. LeBron didn't invent it. But he did it in front of everybody. And we're going to point it out. And I keep going back to the person that this harms the most is Bronny. Just like in any other industry, when somebody is brought in and the belief is you just have this job because of who your dad is, who you're married to, who you're friends with. That's not a good starting point for anyone in any industry. And that's why I felt like it would be better if Bronny went elsewhere. And yet we have this report that Rich Paul is calling teams and saying, if you draft Bronny, he's going to go to Australia rather than play your team. That doesn't help either. It's the nepotism, but on top of it, it's the entitlement, and it's what Rich Paul and LeBron James have been doing. It's not. We can look at Bronny with a critical eye and point out his flaws. Right? Just as we do any draft pick. Okay? But where like the really negative stuff comes in is not actually on Bronny. And I think that's what's being conflated here too, is that ESPN is saying, well, don't take it out on Bronny. We're not taking it out on Bronny. We're not taking it out on Bronny. We're being critical of Bronny because he had almost no impact on USC, and everybody with eyes could see he would be better served staying at USC than going to the NBA. Like, we're putting that on Bronny. But no, we know who's to blame here. We know who needs to be criticized. I'm not going to fault Bronny for taking an opportunity to get drafted in the NBA. And all he said all along is that he wants to make his own way. Nepotism has existed for a very long time. LeBron did not invent it. Bronny is the beneficiary of nepotism, but it's not his fault. He didn't ask for this. I think people are pretty much across the board talking about this in the right way. But it's, Woj saying that nepotism has existed. Yeah, we know, Woj. Yeah, we're aware of it. We don't like it in other facets of life either. And the idea that one group of people has been using nepotism for their gain for a very long time, and so everybody should have their chance at using it. It's like, no, that's not it either. I hope Bronny proves everybody wrong. I do. I legitimately hope that. But we are not wrong on our takes regarding why Bronny James was chosen by the Los Angeles Lakers. We're not wrong about it. 719-247-1313. If you have thoughts, I'll be happy to get to them, but that's what I have to say on the subject. Coming up next, the Nuggets, I think, are sending a clear message through these latest reports that are coming out from Sam Amick. I'll get to those next on Extra Sports 1300. Drive time sports on this Friday helps if you turn on the microphone. Ryan Kaufman with you. 719-247-1313 is the number if you want to text or call in your thoughts. Get to the Nuggets here momentarily, but when you call in, I want to make time for you immediately because your time is precious and valuable, and I appreciate you calling in, as I do with Dave, who wanted to call in and talk about Bronny being selected yesterday by the Lakers at pick 55. Dave, great to have you. Fire away.
Hey, Ryan, nice chatting with you again.
Yeah.
Happy to say that we chatted a while back and we were both right about the Nuggets playoffs, which I'm so sad it happened that way. But regarding Bronny, and I think you bring up a couple points, nepotism doesn't necessarily mean that you're related to these people.
Right.
It is one of the oldest rules of the land. So having said that, let me give you a couple of examples. And I'm a homer, I'm a Bronco fan, but Tim Tebow switching over to baseball. Michael Jordan back in the day switching over to baseball. Now, we all know that if they weren't who they were, they wouldn't have had a shot at playing the other sport. And in this case, you're right. This hurts Bronny, but what about the other people? And in Tim Tebow's case and in Michael Jordan's case, What about the people that have worked their whole life to make that ousted by a guy who doesn't even have the ability to play in the league? And that goes for all three of them. I just wanted your thoughts on them.
Yeah, and I appreciate the call, Dave, and please call back more often. Always love chatting with you. I will say there's
Likewise.
a couple things. One, I never really took the tact of, Bronny's taking something away from somebody. Your points about Tebow or Michael Jordan, I think are fair, but they're a different circumstance in a lot of ways. Because with Bronny, I don't know who I could throw out there and say was more deserving of the 55th pick in the draft. I don't know. So I'm not going to sit here and say Bronny was so much worse. But he was drafted near the very end of the draft. So he was barely a draft prospect. We can agree on that. I'm not going to go so far as to say he's taking something from someone who's worked their entire life for it, because I think you could do worse than Bronny. But my entire issue with this is the team dynamic. Because if Bronny is drafted, and we won't know where, that's the other thing. We don't even know where he would actually have been drafted, because reportedly Rich Paul was calling up teams saying, don't take Bronny. So I don't know. Maybe Bronny goes earlier. I don't think much earlier, but maybe he goes earlier. We don't know, because Rich Paul interceded on his behalf to make sure he went to LA. My problem is the dynamic that Bronny is walking into. Now he's going to get a side eye from every other Laker player who is not bowing down to LeBron James. And that's not good for him. I think I'm looking out for Bronny. I think I'm actually have his best interests at heart. And that's a bold proclamation to say when I am pitted against his father. But I think LeBron James' desire to play with his son, and I understand his desire to play with his son, maybe clouded his judgment a little bit on what is best for him. It's not the worst thing that a parent has ever done, but it's not good. And the dynamics in the Laker locker room are going to be a little awkward, to say the least. So, yeah, maybe Bronny did take a spot from somebody who is more deserving. I'll just point out ESPN's draft board, best available, and late in the second round, Bronny, it actually fit per their draft board. Now, who knows what motivations they had. But let's just take that and say Bronny is about that good. One of the last 5 picks of the draft. I just think he would be, I have pointed out 2 different kinds of teams. Either go to a Detroit or an Atlanta where you could get, maybe not Detroit because that's a really bad situation, but go to a team where you could get a lot of playing time, or go to a contender that just needs dudes because they have so much money tied up in the rest of the roster that they need cheap labor. And it's, you argue, would it be best for Bronny to play or best for Bronny to learn? But he goes to the Lakers, which brings in a whole slew of other dynamics. But you're absolutely right, Dave, and I pointed that out last segment. Nepotism is not just about relation, right? Not just about a relative. And that's why I say JJ Redick is also a product of nepotism. He is a close associate of LeBron James. And that's why he's the Lakers head coach. I just don't think these are the type of dynamics that a team that already is having some problems advancing and getting better wants to invite. But clearly they do, because their top priority is LeBron and not necessarily winning. 719-247-1313. Now let's talk about a team that actually is trying to win, or at least is putting that above all else. Interesting piece today from Sam Amick regarding a couple of big name free agents. One is that he reports that the Nuggets had serious interest in Paul George. And just to give you the mechanics, they were going to trade Michael Porter Jr., Zeke Naji, and you would imagine some draft capital for Paul George. And then the idea would be it would be a sign and trade so George could max out his deal with the Clippers, and then the Clippers and the Nuggets would do that bit of business, and Paul George would be paid the top dollar that he possibly could, but he would be being paid it by the Denver Nuggets. Reportedly, the balk was on the part of the Nuggets, which makes sense because there are reports today that the Clippers are unwilling to give Paul George a max deal. So if Paul George is dead set on getting a max deal and the Clippers can trade him for assets, then that would be probably better for them as long as the assets they would get in return were right. But the balking was on the part of the Nuggets because, again, this is all according to Sam Amick, the Clippers wanted too much draft capital. And you know as well as I do that the Nuggets, and Sam Amick pointed this out in his piece, love their draft capital maybe more than any other team in the league. I don't know if depending on the timing of this, if it's around the time that if they're negotiating this when Mikal Bridges goes to New York, I could see the Clippers going to the Nuggets and saying, well, Mikal Bridges fetched 5 first-round picks. Guess what we're asking for? Porter, Najee, and Najee's just to offset the cost. And we want 5 first-round picks because that's what the Nets got for Mikal Bridges. Paul George is better than Mikal Bridges. And the Nuggets reportedly walked away. Now, taking that deal first, before we get to the other thing that Sam Amick reported, essentially this would be saying that the Nuggets would go into next year with a starting 5 of Murray, Gordon, Jokic, Paul George, and I would imagine it's Christian Brown. And the reason why is because Paul George, his max deal, if the Clippers do end up folding and giving it to him, would be over $50 million. Michael Porter's contract is not worth $50 million a year, nor is Michael Porter's plus Zeke Najee's. But this would be those two guys make up X percent. And then the fact that the Nuggets are now $19 million under the luxury tax threshold, having traded Reggie Jackson, they would make up the rest with the available space they had, which would mean no Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. That's the way it would look to me. You would be giving up Porter and Pope for Paul George. Would you have done that deal? I would have. Because the idea behind me saying that the Nuggets, I don't think, can really afford to lose Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is because of the level of player Michael Porter is. Well, if you hit the upgrade button on Michael Porter and turn him into Paul George, now all of a sudden, you don't need as much from Christian Braun because you have a more well-rounded, better defender, right? More prolific scorer in Paul George. A better defender and a more prolific scorer in Paul George. And I know playoff P, it would be the ultimate smackdown between the playoff Michael Porter and how he starts to fade as the playoffs go along and the almost mythical playoff P. But Paul George would not have as big of a role with the Nuggets as he would the Clippers. He'd be the third guy because they do everything off the two-man game with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. So you get a much better defender and a more prolific scorer, a better player than Michael Porter. Let's just call it what it is. Paul George is better than Michael Porter. But because of his defensive capabilities and the ability to be a more prolific scorer, now some of the things you're losing with KCP, you are getting in the form of Paul George. So if you told me I could turn Michael Porter and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope into Paul George while keeping Gordon, Murray, Jokic, I would do that deal. I would do that deal. And it's not going to go over well that the sticking point is reportedly draft capital. But I can understand Calvin Booth's side of this because I understand the direction he's trying to go, and I understand, giving away 5 first-round picks is a little bit too much. But if this is like 2, 3, then it's like, come on, you got to do that deal. You got to do that deal. I understand you don't unload all of your draft capital for the next 5 years. But if you could find a way to give up 2 years plus Porter and essentially you're giving up Pope, I do that deal. I absolutely would. And so that's the one. I read that today. I was like, oh, I know about the draft capital, but if that was really the sticking point, we better find out. It better have been no fewer than 5 first-round picks. Because Paul George, with a little less of the burden on him, is really interesting. And if it's kind of like, it would be even better than him going to Golden State. Right? Because at Golden State, it would be him and Steph. But in Denver, it would be Jokic, it'd be Murray, and it'd be him. I don't love that the Nuggets balked at that. And it better have been a whole slew of draft picks. Now, the fact that they're speaking in past tense regarding this tells me there's very little chance this gets revived. If they were working towards this, the fact that there's this level of detail and the fact that they're using the past tense tells me this thing is dead. Not happening. But gosh, it better have been a ton of first round picks. And even then, you can recoup draft capital. Look at what Brooklyn did. In like 2 moves, they became Oklahoma City East. In 2 moves. I think the Nuggets could squeeze out a late first-round pick for somebody down the line. That is a tough deal to turn down. Now where the Nuggets go from here, there's another big name that the Nuggets have been linked to. I'll talk about that and also what these two reports from Sam Amick should show you about what the Nuggets are thinking going into next year.
From the Chief Vapor Traffic Center, here's an extra sports look at the streets. This report is sponsored by Rumble.com.
The Rocky Mountain State Games is Colorado's largest sports festival with over 12,000 athletes competing in nearly 40 different sports. Registration is open now for athletes of all ages and skill levels. Learn more at RockyMountainStateGames.org. So, Nuggets reportedly balked at giving up their precious. That was a terrible Schmiegel. Oh my God. Sorry. They didn't want to give up their precious draft capital in order to acquire Paul George. Again, as reported by Sam Amick, The Athletic, Porter, Najee, and picks for Paul George, who would sign a max extension with the Clippers and then be traded to the Denver Nuggets. I say it better have been all of your picks for all time, because I would hate for a first round pick in 2029. Like, is that what we're talking about here? The sixth grader that Tim Connolly happily gave up in order to get Rob Dillingham the other night? Is Calvin Booth holding on to that sixth grader for dear life and is like, no, this dude's going to become a player. I can't give up this 2031 first round pick. Yeah, I think you do that deal. I think you do. And then there's this from the same source, or maybe not the same source, but the same writer, Sam Amick. The Nuggets are interested in Klay Thompson as a replacement for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope should Klay leave Golden State and should Kentavious Caldwell-Pope not re-sign with the Denver Nuggets. This, I don't think, is as much of a no-brainer as the Paul George deal. I would rather, and look, there's a scenario where Kentavious Caldwell-Pope in no way, shape, or form is going to come back to the Denver Nuggets for whatever reason. Right? Whether it's the Bruce Brown reason why he's not in Denver anymore, or whether it's the Jeremy Grant reason why he's not in Denver, there's certainly that possibility. But if there's a chance to retain Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, I would rather the Nuggets do that than bring in Klay Thompson, with the idea that the rest of the team would be the same. I don't like that as much. Defensively, what does Klay bring you? Certainly not what Pope brings you. And certainly Klay, you believe, could still have his nights where he goes off. But KCP's been a pretty consistently good three-point shooter. So the only way, I guess how I'd rank it is this. The Paul George deal is the best Nugget scenario. Okay? Second best scenario is the Nuggets do what they need to do to re-sign Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. The third best option is for the Nuggets to lose Pope and sign Klay Thompson. And then we go to the scenario that is staring the Nuggets currently in the face, which is lose Pope, elevate Brown to the starting five. And I think that the Nuggets, in some form or fashion, are ranking him that way. Because when I read these reports, it tells me that maybe the Nuggets aren't quite as okay without KCP, as Calvin Booth tried to lead you to believe the other night when he said, quote, "we'll be okay if KCP leaves." maybe they feel like they wouldn't be as okay. I know the net rating for Christian Braun because Calvin Booth told us the net rating of Christian Braun is comparable. But I laid out the reasons yesterday. Christian Braun is not as good of an offensive player as KCP, and the type of defense he plays is effort-driven rather than skill and gift-driven. And I wonder, with a high-energy defensive player, whether they can take 30 minutes a night and defend at that level. Christian Braun is better as a bench player at this moment in time, and that's all I can do. Right? I understand there's some projecting that you could still do with a young player, but as of right now, I'd rather have Christian Braun on the Nugget bench than with the starting five. And the minutes that come along with that, which is more important, right? It's about roles. It's not about who, I'd rather have Braun at 20 minutes a night than 30 minutes a night. And I'd rather have KCP for 30 minutes a night than none minutes a night because he's on another team. But I think this is the Denver Nuggets showing that, one, they're not totally cool with Christian Braun being a like-for-like change with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And two, that they are being aggressive. Now, you could be aggressive all you want and still come up short. I understand that, but this is what many Nuggets pundits and fans have been wanting them to do. Don't just sit back on your laurels. Don't just say good enough is good enough and we'll be okay. Go and make something happen if you think it moves the needle. And even by saying that they would look at Klay Thompson in free agency, that's them saying we're not just going to allow for a second straight offseason a key member of our rotation to just walk away from us and think that we'll be fine. If KCP leaves for one reason or another, and if this Paul George proposed deal is actually dead, I would definitely take Klay Thompson in a Nuggets uniform over giving an expanded role to Christian Braun. And the Nuggets just made a cost-cutting move yesterday by trading Reggie Jackson for nothing. So clearly, they're looking to do something. Now, the magnitude of what they're trying to do or what they can do is another question. But clearly, they're angling to do something when free agency opens. Either make one last-ditch attempt to land Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, go out and sign Klay Thompson, or maybe this is just to allow them to go out and get a veteran big man for the mid-level exception. But they are trying to put themselves in a position, a more favorable financial position to do something. Something that they need to do. Because you can even say getting a veteran big man at the mid-level exception, or now you got to look at guards at the mid-level exception, is still doing something they need to do. I think there would be a fair amount of disappointment amongst Nuggets fans, especially given the reports today from Sam Amick that, hey, they were working on a deal with Paul George and they're interested in Klay Thompson, and then they end up bringing back Mason Plumlee. You would be a little disappointed, and I wouldn't blame you for that. But clearly this team is looking to add a veteran piece and maybe one of some significance when free agency begins next week. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. So you have trade Porter, Najee, and multiple first-round picks for Paul George, which would also, I think, mean that KCP would be gone. Okay, so essentially you'd be trading Porter, Najee, picks, and KCP for Paul George. I do that deal. Now that that's fallen through, I'm back to, bring back KCP. If that doesn't work, I think Klay Thompson is interesting. Could you imagine what he can do with the open looks that Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray's two-man game gets him? Not to mention the multiple revenge nights that we would have throughout the schedule when Klay Thompson would meet the Golden State Warriors. And then the absolute worst case scenario is just Christian Brown, come on down. You're our starting two guard. 719-247-1313. Be back after this. Experience the Switchbacks 4th of July Star-Spangled Fireworks Spectacular in the heart of downtown Colorado Springs for the most immersive fireworks show in the state of Colorado. Be there at 5 p.m. to get a special Switchbacks light-up baton provided by Pikes Peak National Bank. Get yo tickets now at switchbacksfc.com. Or, and you know you're leaving it up to chance, just letting you know, the safe way, go get your tickets now, switchbacksfc.com. But if you're feeling lucky on this Friday, let's see. I have 2 tickets for the 4th of July match for the Switchbacks and FC Tulsa with all the fireworks and the light-up batons. If you'd like to go, 13th texter to text Switchbacks and their name to 79247-1313 will win a pair of tickets to the Switchbacks 4th of July Star-Spangled Fireworks Spectacular. Speaking of that text line, here's Aaron on it. Says, can we just take a second to appreciate what's going on the last few years in Ball Arena? 2 championships, 4 MVPs, legitimate hopes for contention, and 2 fun teams to watch. We might not get any more championships, but these 2 teams are led by legit, humble, and fun-to-watch superstars. We'll talk to our kids and grandkids about getting to see MacKinnon and Jokic play, so let's enjoy this. And I am 100% on board with you, Aaron. That's what I started the show by talking about, is I will put the late 90s with, I don't even know why I would, because I wasn't even a Broncos fan, but just the energy and excitement that there was, even though one of the teams that was being so successful is a team I do not root for. But the late 90s, it was once the Avs came in, the rest of the 90s and early 2000s, like that was awesome to be in Colorado and in the Colorado sports scene. But you could argue in terms of accomplishment, and you laid them out right there, that this is maybe just as good. Let's just say that. Right? Because the Broncos won 2 titles, Avs won 1. If you just take a 4-year stretch, you could go back, of course, to 96 and throw in another Avs title. But I'm just talking like a 4-year span that coincided with the ascension of Jokic and the rebuilding of the Avalanche. You would want more titles, but a lot of big-time trophies are going to Colorado. It's great. And your sentiment about these teams might not win again, you're right. You're right. Every year that goes by, they're further removed from their last title, and the decisions get tougher the more the team needs to change, and that's what brings in the uncertainty of whether the Avs and the Nuggets will win their respective league titles. I don't think we're quite to that point yet. I still think that both the Avs and the Nuggets going into next year, regardless of what happens this offseason, can still be among that elite class championship contenders. But the margins are so thin. I mean, that's the thing, right? You know, who knows what would have happened if Valeri Nichushkin doesn't get in trouble in Seattle, or if he doesn't get suspended, or, you know, if Michael Malone would have saved Nikola Jokic for just a couple minutes earlier in Game 7. You go back, especially during this time of year, and start thinking about, man, if just this. And I'm not saying all of those things, if you flipped them, it would have changed anything. I look more at Game 2 of that Nuggets-Wolves series as that was what I needed to see. Right? Yeah, I know the Nuggets were still 2 quarters of basketball away from advancing, but, I mean, the cracks were already there. And that was Game 2. And I certainly don't think Valerian Nichushkin's suspension ultimately kept the Avs from beating the Stars. I think it hit Seattle 2 years ago, kept them from winning that series, but who knows if they would have gone on to win. I'm not saying that if those things are different, then automatically they would be champions again. But you think about that stuff, and it just makes you realize how slim the margins are and also how fleeting success is. And right now, these two teams have done about as good of a job as anybody sustaining a level of success, both individually and team-wise. And you're right, Aaron, that should not be taken for granted. It should not. But also give me more titles. Put more titles in my hand. Yeah, we get greedy. Yeah, we expect more. We do. While understanding that we may not get more. But we expect it, and there's no reason not to expect it. There really isn't. If we learn anything about the fact that Nikola Jokic has won 3 MVPs in 4 years and Nathan MacKinnon is still the MVP, these two teams have something that a lot of teams don't, and that's one of the best players in their respective league. I'll start there for any team, right? You got a McKinnon, you got a McDavid, you got a Jokic, you got a Giannis, you got a LeBron, you got a Steph. You're already ahead of a lot of teams. So it's not unreasonable to expect more. Heck, the head coach of the Nuggets, minutes after winning title number 1, was already talking about title 2, 3. But there's always that realization and that thought in the back of your head. Yeah, this might be it. And certainly with the Avs and the Nuggets, it's a little bit different of a dynamic, right? With the Avs, it's like, well, they have a pedigree. With the Nuggets, I think there was a bit of a feeling in the moment being in that building that if this is it, I'm good. Like, I saw it, I was there, I experienced it, I never thought this would happen. But that's in the moment. And then you start to look around and you start to understand what this team has, and it's worth still pushing. And that's why I think that ultimately these two ideas that the Nuggets reportedly have, according to Sam Amick, I think it's heartening if you're a fan of the Denver Nuggets, because even if you understand the direction that Calvin Booth is taking this team and you love Deron Holmes, you still know that this team needs to do something. Right? And it sounds like they're trying to, which gets you only so far. But it sure seems like the Nuggets are trying to do something fairly significant. Paul George trade is super significant. Signing Klay Thompson would be only slightly less significant. Next week's going to be crazy. You understand what we got next week? Right now, I have on in the studio a 3-hour-long commercial for the Sphere in Vegas. Oh, no, it's the NHL draft. I'm sorry. Could have fooled me because all it's done so far is pump up the Sphere. And I get it. Sphere is awesome. But I didn't tune in for an infomercial about the Sphere. I tuned in for the NHL draft, which, by the way, the Colorado Avalanche have the 24th pick in. And the draft, we always pick out the starting point where the draft starts after number 1. Starts at the number 2 pick because Macklin Celebrini is going to be number 1 to the Sharks. That has been as done can be. We'll see what the Avs get. Doesn't feel the same way as the NBA draft, certainly, and for obvious reasons. But Avs still have a chance to get somebody. Steve G says, you talk about Malone burning out Joker, his phobia about playing young players. When is the time to play them? Maybe when your starters are dragging their tongues. Fair. But we take it one step back, right? Jokic clearly needed a rest in Game 7. Okay, who do you go to? Whoops, you have no options. Why do you have no options? Because you didn't develop the young guys, and you don't have a legitimate backup center on the roster. Right? So there, you backtrack a little bit. And Michael Malone has acknowledged it multiple times that he probably, not so much Game 7, but just the season, that he maybe put too much into getting the best seed possible and may have adversely impacted his team come playoff time. I think you could see that. Was it ultimately the difference? No. I just think they ran up against a Minnesota Timberwolves team that was built to beat them, and they struggled mightily with that prospect. And then you throw in, for whatever reason, why Jamal Murray was so much less effective in this postseason than the last. That's what it came down to. Yeah, it would have been nice for Jokic to be a little bit more fresh towards the end of that game. But the Nuggets' issues this year, I think, ran a little bit deeper than that. So fair point, but there's more to that. And maybe all of this realization benefits Deron Holmes because maybe he gets a chance that maybe previous rookies under Michael Malone did not get, other than, of course, Christian Brown. He's a unique case. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, we'll reset things with the 3 stories that are driving the show and a little bit of a NBA draft recap. The grades are in. Let you know how I feel about the grades that the Nuggets are being given. And really, we should judge what the Nuggets did compared to other contenders. Right? I mean, that's the way I think you should look at it. So, yeah, there are teams inside the top 5 that probably got a better grade and made out better than the Nuggets. Well, yeah. But they're bad teams, and they're not going to be any good this year either. So how do the Nuggets stack with the contenders that we think there will be in the NBA next season? I'll let you know and let you know what the national media thinks on that. Take your thoughts, 719-247-1313. But as I said, coming up next, the 3 stories that are driving the show here on Extra Sports 1300. Drive Time Sports on a Friday. It's the best kind of Drive Time Sports. Welcome in. Appreciate you tuning in, whether it's on your radio, on the Extra Sports 1300 app, or whether you're watching on our social media platforms, be it Instagram, X, or Facebook. The handle all the same, at XTRA Sports 1300. If you would like to have your say on this Friday before we head into the weekend, please feel free. The text and phone line are the same for your convenience. They're 719-247-1313. Time to get to the three stories that are driving the show. All right, let's start. Story number one is long overdue.
I honestly never thought I'd win these, so very special. Like I said in my speech, like just every player I grew up idolizing has their name on these things. So to be a part of that company is surreal. It hasn't really sunk in, and it's definitely a special thing.
That is Avalanche centerman Nathan MacKinnon, who at long last has his first Hart Trophy as NHL's MVP. He also took home the Ted Lindsay Award last night, which is the MVP as the NHL players see it. But yes, this is long overdue. He had a couple of really good cracks at it before. One time, I think he was robbed by Taylor Hall. The other time, Leon Draisaitl had a pretty good year. But you just look at it, regardless of what years he was up for, what years he doesn't, it does seem a little bit crazy that we're here, 11 years into Nathan MacKinnon's career, and he's now just collecting his first MVP. How many years did it take Nikola Jokic? Like 5? But it's tough. You think about, Connor McDavid. It's his league, and he garners so much attention to the point that even his teammates put together MVP caliber seasons. But yeah, he probably should have had one before now. But he finally gets it, and now he has a Stanley Cup. He has a Calder Trophy way back in the day, and now he has an MVP. And the names on that list, he talked about the names on the Hart Trophy. Well, it's an even shorter list of the guys who have been Rookie of the Year, MVP, and won a Stanley Cup. That's Ovechkin. That's Lemieux. That's Patrick Kane. Evgeny Malkin. Like, Lemieux's kind of an outlier because he's all-time great of the game. But when you talk about the best players of this generation, of the last 20 years, Malkin, Ovechkin, Kane, and Nathan MacKinnon, that's the list he's on. That's the list he deserves to be on. And now he has kind of that ultimate trump card, I think, to play, not because Nikita Kucherov doesn't have an MVP, but I think you could see that Nathan MacKinnon was the best player not named Connor McDavid in this league for the last few years. But he didn't have that particular piece of hardware in addition to the Stanley Cup. And now he has both. And I think it cements his place as second in the pecking order behind only Connor McDavid. This is a guy that can take over games, not just with his skill, but with his physicality. He wills it. Right? You think about Nathan MacKinnon charging down the ice, that slingshot thing that the Avs do with him, and just skating as fast as anybody and with as much ferocity as anybody allows him to take over games. And he did that more than a few times this season. 5-on-5, if you're into analytics, no one in the league was better than Nathan MacKinnon 5-on-5 this year. And if you like your more traditional numbers, he was the only player this year in the NHL to be in the top 4 in both goals and assists, and only lost the Art Ross Trophy by 4 points. And, oh, by the way, it wasn't even close, the voting. That's the lead. I buried the lead. I expected Nathan MacKinnon to win the MVP. I really did. I didn't expect him to garner 90 more first place votes than Nikita Kucherov. It wasn't even close. And you know what it reminds me of is Jokic's second MVP. But like double that. Jokic's second MVP, it was like, oh, where are they going to go? Are they going to give it to Nikola Jokic back-to-back years? Really? There's Joel Embiid. And he ended up winning by like 40 first-place votes. It wasn't particularly close. And this is double that. It was a runaway. And look, that could indicate that some voters had their mind very made up a while ago, that it's his time. I know there's some of that. There's some of that in every MVP voting in every league. But that doesn't account. Like maybe that pads his lead a bit, but doesn't change the fact that he was the MVP and he deserved it. And now he finally has that important piece. Whenever we talk about Hall of Famers, whenever we talk about some of the generation's best players, usually need that trophy in their case. And now Nathan MacKinnon does. And for the first time since 1989, and the only other time since 1989, one city is home to two sports' MVPs. Wayne Gretzky and Magic Johnson each won for the Lakers and the Kings back in 1989. Pretty good company. But congrats to Nathan MacKinnon. Deserves it. Absolutely does. Now for the team across the hall. Some interesting reporting today, courtesy of Sam Amick of The Athletic. The Nuggets may not be totally okay with the idea of Christian Braun just taking over for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Sam Amick reported today for The Athletic that two significant names have been linked to the Denver Nuggets. First, Paul George. He reported that the Nuggets engaged the Clippers in what would be a sign and trade, where Paul George would sign his max extension, which would be worth more money than he could get on the open market because the Clippers have his bird rights, that kind of thing. He would sign his max deal, which reportedly the Clippers aren't willing to give him, trade that to the Denver Nuggets in exchange for Michael Porter Jr., Zeke Naji, and draft capital. Why isn't this done yesterday, you may ask? Reportedly, the Nuggets were not willing to part with the number of picks that the LA Clippers wanted. That's a tough pill to swallow. Because just as a basketball trade, even if that meant that the Nuggets could not re-sign Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, I do that deal. I do that deal. Because Paul George, if I just told you that you could trade Michael Porter and KCP for Paul George, you would do that deal. So essentially, all you're throwing in are picks and Zeke Naji. And the Nuggets would be a better team. I don't know how many picks the Clippers wanted, but you know that the Nuggets value their draft picks very, very much. Perhaps it was the 5 that the Nets got for Mikal Bridges. I kind of feel like it better be 10 first-round picks because that sounds like a dynamite trade for the Denver Nuggets to try and reclaim what they have lost, and that being the Larry O'Brien trophy. But that seems dead and gone. But then Sam Amick continued with the possibility that if Kentavious Caldwell-Pope were to leave, that the Nuggets would turn their attention to Klay Thompson. Now, Klay Thompson, at this point, there are some questions about him, but there's little doubt in my mind that that dude needs a fresh start. Whatever he has left, he needs to have a different city to bring it out of him. I think he's mentally done with the Warriors organization. But you think about Klay Thompson with a fresh start, being one of the guys waiting on the wing for a pass out of the Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray two-man game. That's intriguing. But I think it's the right wording that Sam Amick puts on it, because I don't think that the Nuggets should just say bye to KCP and put everything into signing Klay Thompson. Right? The Paul George trade, best move. But I'd rather have Pope than I would Thompson. But what this shows more than anything else is that despite what Calvin Booth may have said the other night about the Nuggets being okay if they lose Kentavious Caldwell-Pope because they can plug and play Christian Brown, maybe that's not quite accurate. Or perhaps another very important person within the Nuggets organization is saying, if I got to play these young guys, you better get me a really good veteran player. So we'll see if the Paul George stuff gets rekindled. It sure feels like he's on his way to Golden State one way or another. But see if they can restart those talks. And if KCP does leave for whatever reason, I would rather have Klay Thompson than Christian Brown in that spot. And I wouldn't be losing Christian Brown. I don't want to lose Christian Brown. I just want him in the role he's currently in. Free agency starts next week. It's going to be nuts. Speaking of things and people and entities that are nuts, here's story number 3.
You know, we talked beforehand about the tendencies of this referee. We knew what he's capable of. And, you know, to be honest, I think we played right into his hands. And we made it, you know, that decision, I think, pretty easy. You know, Tim got bumped, he got checked, and he reacted. And, you know, he apologized to the group. And, you know, I think he understands what a difficult position he put the group in. Nonetheless, it happened. And, you know, as a result, you know, we lost this game. And, you know, we're going to have to move on and figure out how to win next game.
That is U.S. men's national team coach Greg Berhalter after the United States lost a match to the referee. At least that's the way he sees it. I see it a bit differently. I see the United States losing to Panama, a team that they have no business losing to. The blame, the lion's share of the blame for last night's other disaster in Atlanta for America is on Tim Weah. Okay? You can't lose your head in that moment, because you put your team in a very difficult position. But Tim Weah apologized for what it's worth. Yet, the U.S. men's national team took the lead going down to 10 men And you can't tell me that Greg Berhalter can get in the lab and cook up a game plan to protect a lead. Even if the United States gets a tie last night, they're in an infinitely better spot than they currently are in. And Greg Berhalter's up there talking like they game planned for the official and they failed in that game plan. Like, worry about Panama. So this sets up quite the Sophie's choice if you're a fan of U.S. soccer. Because the way I see this match against Uruguay, if they lose, they get bounced in the group stage of Copa America. A disastrous result. And it's a result that would almost assuredly get Greg Berhalter fired. And there is where the tough choice is. Because Greg Berhalter should not be the head coach of the U.S. men's national team. I don't think that the search for his replacement was exhaustive enough. I think that the search was a bit lazy and they came back with a lazy choice and the wrong choice. Greg Berhalter should have been done after the World Cup. And a lot of U.S. soccer fans agree with me. So, you want your team to advance? You want your team to win? Or do you want to look out for the long-term health of your team and make sure this guy is canned and the U.S. does a proper coaching search and finds someone that can actually move the needle for what should be, what is, not even what should be, what is one of the most talented American soccer teams we have ever seen. These guys play in Europe in some of the biggest leagues in the world. Christian Pulisic just ran roughshod through Serie A. This team shouldn't be losing to Panama. I don't care how many players they have on the field. And that is a direct reflection of their coach. Greg Berhalter was always the guy before the guy. Now it's time to find the guy after this guy. But the only way that will happen is if they don't get the result they need against Uruguay. So it's either going to be an amazing result with their backs up against the wall or it'll be the end of the Greg Berhalter era. Either way, tune in if you're a soccer fan. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. Coming up next, a team in the West that is looking to get up to the level that the Denver Nuggets are right now has made a significant move. Tell you what it is next on Extra Sports 1300. The best pro rodeo cowboys and cowgirls from the U.S., Canada, Mexico, all are coming to Colorado Springs July 9th through the 13th for the NFR Open at the Pikes Peak or Bust Rodeo with $1 million in payouts. They'll be riding to win. This is where champions and careers are made. Get your tickets now at pikespeakorbust.org. And I've said this before. If you're creating a Colorado Springs sports bucket list, Pikes Peak or Bust Rodeo will be on there. I get it. Rodeo may not be your thing. I'm telling you, it's an event you should just check out once. It's worth it. In fact, I'd like to send you there. Can I do that? Can I send you to this significant sporting event in our fair city? I would like to do that. If you text rodeo and your name to 719-247-1313, and you are the 13th person to do so, give you a pair of tickets to see the Pikes Peak or Bust Rodeo. And then you can come back. You can tell me, Ryan, you're a genius. I'm so glad I went. Rodeo wasn't my thing, but I went there and I had an amazing time. And I'll be like, yeah, I know. Where's my money? By the way, I don't want you to miss a minute of this. And if you got to, I know there are other ways you can listen on the app. You can watch the show on social media. You could still consume this show while doing something else. But I kind of feel like this needs to be like one of those things that you just completely focus on and watch it. If you came away from either the U.S. and Panama or Biden versus Trump and said, I need more of that kind of entertainment in my life, I need more of this, may I point out that right now, a 3-game series is starting between the 27-win National League worst Colorado Rockies and the 22-win AL and MLB worst Chicago White Sox. And this isn't one night. This isn't an hour and a half. Oh, no. This is like 3 hours tonight, 3 hours tomorrow, 3 hours Sunday, 9 hours. So if you said, I need more Tim Weah red cards, and I need more of whatever the hell that was on CNN last night, Rockies White Sox, lock it in, baby. Lock it in. I just don't want you to miss any of it. And if you see anybody on social media to make that comparison, just know where you heard it first, okay? Can't tell you the number of times I've said something on this show, and hours later I find out on social media. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. The Pelicans have made a significant move today. Within the last hour, they have acquired the services of DeJounte Murray in exchange for like a bunch of picks and like some bench player. So not the Mikal Bridges 5. So maybe not every team is entitled to 5 first-round picks for a guy that they're trading. Should tell you, in comparison, this is certainly not as seismic of a move as Mikal Bridges going to the Knicks or the proposed trade that fell through between the Nuggets and the Clippers and the Nuggets getting Paul George. But this is a needle mover, right? We see these moves. Alex Caruso to OKC, Mikal Bridges to the Knicks, Aaron Gordon to the Nuggets, Andre Iguodala to the Warriors. You can spot it as soon as it happens. This is the Pelicans' move. Now, this is not necessarily to make them a title contender, but this is a move aimed to get them a seat at the big boy table. We talk about OKC, we talk about Minnesota, we talk about Denver, we talk about Dallas. They want that fifth chair. The Pelicans want to say, we're in this mix too. And you think about a team that was so horrendously bad in closing out games. And you get a big-time shot maker in DeJounte Murray. Now, I am a little curious how, he and CJ McCollum fit together, because Trae Young and DeJounte Murray didn't fit that well. So there's some things that the Pelicans got to figure out. But you look at this team, you have Zion, and let's not forget where we left things with Zion. We left things with Zion Williamson dominating that playing game and leaving due to injury. And the Pelicans sorely missing him. So Zion's maybe turned a corner, although his inability to get back on the court maybe calls into question some of the other things with Zion Williamson. But as a player, you saw him dominate that playing game. And the Pelicans severely miss him. So Zion taking a turn maybe. You have a good veteran in CJ McCollum. You add DeJounte Murray. Yes, they got to figure out something with Brandon Ingram. And reportedly, they're trying to figure something out. I know some people are down on Brandon Ingram. I'm not. I like him a lot. Murray, Ingram, McCollum, Zion, Herb Jones. I think that might be enough to put New Orleans kind of in that conversation. Definitely fifth, definitely at the bottom of that pecking order. But we don't know what Dallas is going to look like. They got some things to figure out. Nuggets have a big thing to figure out. OKC, we think they're locked in and ready to go to contend for a title next year. Minnesota with some questions, but I like this move for New Orleans. If you look at New Orleans as the same level as Sacramento, the two LA teams, kind of that second tier of contender in the West, I think that at least this moves them to the top of that. And then we'll see what they can do against OKC, Denver, Minnesota, Dallas. But I like this move. DeJounte Murray, clutch performer, shot maker. Pelicans need both. I like the move a lot. It's already shaping up to be quite the free agency period. Or this is it and we get very little. No, we'll get Paul George. I don't think Clay's going back to Golden State one way or another. Does he end up with the Nuggets? I think they're probably down in the list of possibilities. Paul George, the report today that Paul George, the Clippers don't want to offer him a max contract. He'll go get a max contract somewhere. He will. So if the Clippers aren't willing to do a max contract, then Paul George will not be a Clipper. And you can kind of see the musical chairs that may go on. So if Paul George goes to, let's say, Golden State, which I would say right now is the most likely place for him to go. Okay. He goes to Golden State. That opens up a spot on LA. They need a guy. Over from Chicago comes DeMar DeRozan, right? Makes way too much sense. LA guy, went to USC, was at the Kendrick Lamar concert the other night. I mean, what else do I have to point out to make you believe that DeMar DeRozan would happily sign with the LA Clippers to play alongside Kawhi Leonard, right? Chicago Bulls aren't replacing it with anything because they're hitching their wagon to Josh Giddey's star. Good luck with that. They're going to do more tearing down before they build this thing back up. So Paul George going to Golden State puts DeMar DeRozan in LA, sends Klay Thompson out of Golden State with the two most logical destinations being Philly, Orlando, and let's throw in Denver. Let's throw in Denver for these purposes. So Klay leaves Golden State, and his most likely choices, rank them however you want, but his three likely choices are between Philly, Orlando, and Denver. Okay? You also have Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, whose three most logical destinations are Philly, Orlando, and Denver. Two players that I think all three of those teams are interested in. Three teams, two players. Someone's going to miss out on Pope and Thompson. For me, it would be, and I love Mickey Mouse as not much as the next guy. I do. And I understand it's so much of the NBA is the highest bidder. It really is. And don't let anybody convince you otherwise. But gosh, if the Nuggets can offer let's say Klay Thompson or KCP, I think KCP would fetch more money than Klay in free agency. So let's just take Klay because KCP might be $25 million. Let's say the choice for Klay and KCP goes to Philly. Okay. I get it. It's the highest bidder. It's get the most money you can. But if you're Klay Thompson and your reputation has been somewhat diminished, and Golden State's kind of kicking you to the curb, at least that's what you're telling yourself. I don't know that that's really the case. You telling me if the Nuggets can offer $19 million, that $21 million from Orlando would get Klay Thompson at Disney World? Like, come on now. I know it's about the money, but can it not be about the money to the tune of like $2 million? But we'll see. But you see these potential. And then if George stays in LA, now does Klay stay in Golden State or does he still leave? Where does DeMar DeRozan go? So Paul George kind of creates a bit of a domino effect when it comes to the free agency market where, you know, Mikal Bridges perhaps started a domino effect in the trade market. I do very much enjoy this time of year. And it really gets going next week. So DeJounte Murray to the New Orleans Pelicans. Where does that put them in the pecking order? Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Come back, talk a little bit of a NBA draft wrap, although Deron Holmes will be meeting with the media Monday in Denver. So we'll hear more from Deron Holmes, but some reaction to the draft and where I think the Nuggets rank with other contenders in terms of what they were able to get done in the draft. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. NHL draft is underway. Macklin Celebrini. Anybody else immediately picture Parks and Recreation when you hear the name Macklin Celebrini? You know, Burt Macklin, FBI. Just me? Okay. Macklin Celebrini going number 1 overall to the San Jose Sharks. Avs on the clock at pick 24, and pick number 5 is where they're at. So you got a while. Can I just say, as I'm looking at the draft, they're doing it at the Sphere in Vegas, how happy I am. LA, Southern California based hockey teams, you did good. You see the jersey, the new releases for the Kings and the Ducks. Ducks are going back to the duck goalie mask. Never should have left it. That was always the best way to go. Now they're keeping their color scheme. They're not going back to the purple and green, which is, you know, I would prefer it, but they got a pretty good color scheme going. But I'm so happy they brought back that logo. And how about the Kings? What's old is new again. The only thing I don't like, the font that Los Angeles is in, it's different than what they had back when Gretzky was there. I don't like that font where it says Los Angeles. But that's a small detail. The fact of the matter is they went back to essentially what they had back in the Gretzky days. What's old is new again. Ducks with their current color scheme, bringing back the angry duck goalie. So good. Perfect. So I always say, you don't have new good ideas. They're all been taken. Right? And look at the Kings and the Ducks. Did they upgrade over what they had? Absolutely not. They got worse. It was worse than what they had. And now they go back to the thing that was good. There are no good new ideas. If you're looking for a rebrand, if you're looking for a logo change, just go back to what you used to have. And I promise you that would be better than any logo that you're a graphic designer, or let's call it what it is, AI, right? That's what everyone does now. They use AI to build them a graphic. I promise you, those stupid robots are not going to be able to come up with a cooler logo than what the Anaheim Ducks have gone back to. No way. By the way, fun thing about, I showed my boss this today. So I just like to every once in a while check in to make sure if Skynet is up and running and the robots are going to take over. And I use AI as kind of my measuring stick. Okay, what's AI up to these days? The AI that Twitter uses, X uses, Grok, whatever that is, aggregated a bunch of stuff and spit out the headline that LeBron James is accused of having an affair with a teammate. You get the joke immediately, yes? AI took all of our thoughts about the fact now that LeBron James is sleeping with the mother of one of his teammates, that low-hanging fruit, and took it and turned it into a legitimate news story. Hey, Twitter user, did you see that LeBron James is accused of having an affair with one of his teammates' mothers? So pleased to report robots are not quite in position yet to take over the world. I mean, we're getting there. Don't get me wrong, but not there yet. Oh, the number of tweets I saw referencing the fact that LeBron James and then Zach Wilson gets brought into it, of course. A little different circumstance there. They are not the same. People trying to put the equal to sign, LeBron equal to Zach Wilson. No, put a line through that. Not the same. Not the same thing. Steve G wants to take a different option rather than watching the Rockies take on the White Sox. Is there a category of getting a filling without Novocaine? That's what I'm suggesting. It's the same sensation. Trust me. Watch the Rockies and the White Sox. It's the exact same sensation as getting a filling without Novocaine, getting a tooth pulled without the laughing gas. It's the same thing. I'm telling you, watch the game. Don't watch it for too long. I don't know how, high your pain threshold is, but it's the same thing. You will feel the exact same way. I promise you. Science. So now that the 2-round NBA draft that could have still stayed within one day, I don't know why they stretched it into 2 days, but it's now over and all the grades are coming out. Certainly can't quite do it to the extent that we do this for the National Football League. But I think it's a little unfair to lump the Nuggets in with some of these teams with a slew of draft picks or drafting very high in the draft. Right? And really it doesn't matter to the Denver Nuggets at all what the Atlanta Hawks did. Right? It's of no concern. So if you look at what the Nuggets did, which I think overall they grade out pretty well. Deron Holmes, for fit, where they got him, what he brings to the table, I think that the Nuggets, and I said this the other day, I thought that the Nuggets did extremely well, given the limitations that they were drafting in the 20s, and they're looking for a depth piece, not a face of the franchise. Thought they did very well. The two other contenders that I think did better, and I like what a lot of the contenders did. Baylor Shireman to Boston, I like that a lot. But I think what Minnesota did was maybe the best draft. Because they are a team that didn't need much, got exactly what they needed, and got a premium player in Dillingham to fill that role. And then somehow Terrence Shannon ends up falling into their lap in the late 20s. I think Tim Connolly crushed it. And that should not be a surprise because he's been doing that dating back to the time he was in Denver. Yes? You remember some of the picks that he's made? Michael Porter, Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic. So he continues to do it in Minnesota. And I like what OKC did because by taking Nikola Topic, no, I'm not making that name up. That's his actual name, Nikola Topic, not to be confused with Nikola Jokic or Nikola Vucevic or Nikola, what's the one on the other Jokic, whatever that kid's name is in Miami. Nikola Topic would have been probably a top 5 pick had he not suffered an ACL tear. So Oklahoma City gets him later. And I mean, it feels a little like Michael Porter, right? Oklahoma City took advantage of the fact that there were so many teams in front of them that needed to get somebody they could get on the court now. Oklahoma City doesn't have that issue because they have multiple Jalen Williams. They have Chet. They have Shea. They just landed Caruso. Like, they don't need a guy. I could argue Oklahoma City needed a guy in the draft less than Denver did. And they get a guy that, in terms of a talent, is maybe one of the 5 or 6 best prospects, and they get him much later only because he won't play at all this season. It's a pretty good deal for OKC. So I liked what they did. But I'll tell you, for the contenders, as far as one player, I think the Nuggets are probably there at the top. And with Minnesota and OKC, I think it's the fact that they got multiple players that I like, that I think can help them, and they got better players, right? Dillingham's better than Deron Holmes. Topic as a prospect, better than Deron Holmes. So of the contenders, I probably put Minnesota 1, OKC 2, Denver 3. Really like the pick of Deron Holmes. And you will hear from him come Monday because he will be in the state. And that's it. We're only at pick 7. Oh, my God. Did Jerome McGinley's kid just get drafted? TJ Ginla, is that Jerome's kid? Another kid of a player that I grew up watching. Anyway, they're at pick 7 with Ottawa. Avs at pick 24. We'll go over a little bit of the draft come Monday. And don't forget, NBA free agency, NHL free agency. Next week is going to be nuts. So enjoy the weekend. Rest up. We'll see you out at Widener Field tomorrow night for the Switchbacks in Monterey Bay. And we'll talk to you during that same time right here on Extra Sports 1300.